Hello and welcome to the final video of COSC 121. So in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about a topic dear to your hearts, the final exam. So here's a slide on it, and this is available on the Learn page as well. Summary, really, it's very much like the term test, except it's 3 hours long and there's 2 sittings back to back. But I'm going to tell you a bit more than that. So moving on, first of all, the difficulty ramp is certainly different from the term test. In the term test you had a lot of questions you should have seen before, plus a few at the end you hadn't. So there was a difficulty step. In the final exam all the questions are new and they will ramp up in difficulty in an approximate sense. So I've said here they roughly ramp up throughout the exam, more or less, but don't depend on it. It's sometimes a bit of a shame that students hit a question they can't answer and they flail away on that and they don't look ahead to see if there's any, to them, easier questions later on. So here's an attempt to demonstrate that display ramp. It sort of curves up and they get more and more difficult at the end. As you get into GUIs and OOs, the programs are longer and of course they call on more advanced knowledge as well. But at the start they're just simple 1- and 2-line programs and functions, sort of like you had in the term test. There will be roughly 25 questions in the final exam compared to 22 in 1.5 hours in the test. So I hope you'll be under less time pressure, but I do wish to emphasize that the notion of time pressure is a little bit of a puzzle for some people. I've said here that you'll run into questions you can't answer in a reasonable time. By that I mean you reach a point where you're no longer fluent. You don't really know what to do and you have to start reading lecture notes or something like that. At that point you're going to run out of time, basically. So I want to emphasize fluency rather than speed, that you basically know what you're doing in a type of question. This shows you the marks earned by all the students in COSC 121 S2, which is a typical sort of plot. So you can see things tend to flatten out. So most students have got a fair percentage, like 70-odd% of their marks by halfway, in fact, sometimes even by a third of the way through the 3-hour exam. So you can see there's a sort of general tendency of the plot is to go up rapidly for a start and then hit this fluency level. So as to what the exam instructions look like, we haven't written this year's exam yet, or this semester's exam, but here's the one from the instructions from last semester, S2 2017. So quickly running through them, you have 3 hours. I think we may have 25, 24, 20, possibly as many as 26, but the precise number is not really that important. You must write Pylon compliant code, but here this is important. You don't need to have doc strings. We remove those as a requirement, but on the other hand, you're welcome to use them, and a lot of students find it quite helpful to enter the doc string at the start of every function to remind themselves of what they're meant to be doing. Do try to be careful with your time allocation. If you hit a hurdle and you can't get a question written, put it to one side, move on, and then come back to it later if you have time. All the questions in this quiz are in the usual quiz mode. There's a check button to let you test your answer, and there's usually a pre-check as well for style checking purposes. The penalty system's a little bit unusual. This may change in some ways, but you will not pay a penalty in the first 12 questions for a wrong submission. So this is to ease the pressure a bit. You can have one crack at it for about the first 12. I'm not sure of that number. And after that, you'll be back onto the usual penalty regime you're familiar with through the whole course of paying a 10% penalty from the very start. So we're easing the pressure on you just at the start. So the quiz runs in the normal mode of all or nothing. You have to pass all the tests to get any marks. It is possible that there will be a mistake. It's very, very rare. If you think that your answer is absolutely correct, then you can put a flag by it. There's a little flag button up there by the question number called flag question. You can click that, but you must also email me after the exam. I'm not going to go through and look for all the flags because lots of students flag questions for other reasons. So do tell me afterwards if you believe we've marked you wrong unfairly in some way. But note that this is only if you think we've made a mistake. We're not giving you marks because you almost got it right. Sorry, that's not how this course works. As usual with exams, if you can't get something right, you move on to the next question. Navigate round through the quiz using the navigation panel. Hopefully you know how to do that. Later questions are more time-consuming than earlier ones, so you have to go at a faster pace at the start, but that's pretty automatic anyway, because frankly, if you're at all fluent, you'll find you'll race through the earlier questions. We'll normally only show you the first failing test. We won't show you all of the missing tests. We're expecting you to do a little bit of careful testing before you throw stuff at the server. We will give you one sheet of blank paper. If you want to make use of that, you've got to bring in a pen or pencil. And there will, as usual, or as in the test, the lecture notes will be there. You shouldn't depend on those. They're there as a psychological prop. If you get kind of panicky, you know that the lecture notes are there. I'm afraid you'll have to stay for the full 3 hours because we've got back-to-back exams and we don't want people leaving and talking to other people. You'll be ushered out at the end of the 3 hours. And we do reserve the right to regrade or rescale. It's extremely rare and improbable that we do that, but the possibility is there, and that's just us covering our backs there. As to how you study for it, critical thing is fluency, as I've said before. So the only way you get that is practice, practice, practice. I use, by analogy, getting good at sports. You get there at your practice in the squash court, you practice with friends, you practice whatever other sports, you practice the piano, musical instruments. It's the only way to acquire skills in anything at all. It's got to essentially burn the whole game into your brain. So you should be doing all the labs again. You should look through the various drill quizzes, including the program reasoning drill quiz. And there's also a new quiz up there, or sort of new this semester anyway, what's the output? Now, just a word of warning about that. Obviously, asking you a question, what's the output, we're not going to do that during the exam because you'll just copy the code into Python and run it. So if you want to get value out of these what is the output questions, clearly you're meant to read through and answer them manually, pretending you don't have a Python available. And I think you'll find that useful learning exercise, but you have to be self-disciplined and not just take the easy option of running the code. You could, or I really should, do the assignments again. I think you should find them much easier the second time round. If not, there's a serious problem. You can also practice on the site we've told you about several times, codingbat.com. And we have made available 2 previous exams from COSC 121. So just to show you those, there's a new section now on the server here called Exam Revision. And in there is a little bit of information. I'll just zoom in so you can see it better. A little bit of information and link to the old exams, the old handwritten exams. They're useful for brushing up skills if you've got the time. Very different format, of course. And there's the 2 practice copies of the exam, and you should definitely run through those, both of them, and you can do them as many times as you like. It helps you practice working under a bit of time pressure, or at least limited time. Just one thing I want to mention, which I'll just demonstrate by looking at one of those exams, and I see a lot of people wasting screen real estate. If you're in an exam room and you're running with Boost, which is the normal theme that everybody uses, I see everybody in an exam with this thing on the left-hand side. You don't have that much screen real estate. Why are you showing that menu? There's a little button up here, the hamburger menu. At the very start, when you set yourself up, click that button, get rid of that wasted space. Most unlikely you'll need that during the test. Right, where was I? Back on track here. That's where I am. It's me done. That's all from us, really. So on behalf of the teaching team, Andy, Paul, Yeleni, myself, and our wonderful team of student tutors, I hope you've enjoyed the course. It's certainly been interesting doing the videos for us anyway. Best of luck with the final exam. Thanks for watching. Bye.